Hey, Kristin Snowden.
Hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Kristin Snowden. I'm a therapist and certified life coach, and thank you for joining me. My webinars are devoted to focusing on the good, bad, light, dark, pretty, and ugly parts of loving, of being in connection, of
Mhm.
being in relationship, all the way from the extremes of sex addiction and severe betrayal to single infidelities to again recovery and getting out of general, more common relationship crisis issues. I wanted to take a minute at the very beginning to tell you that I am revamping my website. I've received the email. I got the message that we need more help, more support, and it is on the way. So I'm developing more workshops to get you that support, that group, that community of people that you can talk about your stuff safely with. And then my platform is also going to have a community where you can log in and join a group continuously. So let's say a betrayed partner or people who are working on their shame issues and stuff like that. So keep checking my website, kristinsnowden.com. You can also always touch base with Tammy at sexandrelationshiphealing.com. But we are working on getting more help, more support, more community there for you that's accessible, that's affordable. We're working on it, so keep checking back. And I'm also going to be adding a few more resources. Go ahead, Tammy.
I have
You look
one
like you're going to say something.
well, I do. I have one exciting announcement for betrayed partners as well. So Troy Love, who does the fourth week of the month on this series, who talks about attachment wounds, and he does the men's addict group talking about attachment wounds. He's going to be starting a every other Thursday betrayed partner to look at the attachment wounds often that are caused
Okay.
by the addict. So that's another resource. So we are both and all committed to having more resources and more help. So keep checking in with us. So
Yes, keep checking. We got lots of updates. So with that said, let's dive into this topic. I've been devoting my webinars to focusing in on some of the themes that I've been writing about in my book, Life Anonymous. In a nutshell, it's a book that kind of talks about through my story and my experiences working in addiction recovery, but not identifying as an addict per se, how I've adopted and brought the 12-step concepts from AA and the world of the 12-step fellowship into my life as a non-addict. I co-wrote it with Scott Brassert, who also works with sexandrelationshiphealing.com, but he is a sex and drug addict in recovery. And so we both kind of wanted to write and share our stories and approaches to how we adopted the 12-step concepts in our life and what they mean to us. And we also write curriculum. So it's a workbook as well, where we have exercises, we have things for you to kind of take what you learn conceptually and apply it with pen to paper and use it, adopt the concepts that way. So the first couple, I'm on step 3 right now. Step 1, as we know, is that we've accepted or that our life has become powerless to, we are powerless to our addiction, or it also can be we're powerless to the people around us, we're powerless to life, we're powerless to our coping skills, um, and that our lives have become unmanageable as a consequence of that. The second step is we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And today I'm going to talk about how step 3, which is we've made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand a God. And we're going to be talking about that because that's a hot button word that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And we are going to try to touch upon that. So step 1 in a nutshell was trying to just figure out what's not working for us, right? We kind of sit down and figure out the patterns, the consequences, what our values and goals were and how we might have stopped acting in alignment and congruently with our values and goals because of whatever life situation we're in. Sometimes we've been severely betrayed and traumatized and we didn't sign up for that life, but we find ourselves kind of chained by the trauma and the struggle around that. So there's lots of different ways that our life can become powerless. We can be powerless to what's going on around us and it's unmanageable. But step 1 talks about how to kind of come to the acceptance of that. Step 2 is about that you realize you can't do it alone. We all, use our traits and talents and our best thinking to get us out of our problems. And step two, just kind of raising our hand, waving the white flag, whatever you want to say, is just, I can't do this on my own and I need help. So step three is more of like the first action step, so to speak. It's the first time that the 12 steps is asking you to take an action, because it's make a decision to accept outside help. It's make a decision to turn your will and your life over to God as we understand him or her. Um, those who had a positive spiritual practice of some kind, where they, kind of felt like they know what a God is and how they understand what a God is and a higher power. Step three can be pretty basic, of just like, oh yeah, I remember that experience, and start readopting it into your life, and surrendering your will, and trusting, building trust, etc. But a lot of people, especially those in the addiction world, or people who've been betrayed so severely or traumatized so severely, um, they struggle with a higher power, and understandably so. For some people, they feel like a higher power has been judgmental, punishing, um, constantly thinks of you and your life as disappointment. For me personally, I'd been through a slew of really unfortunate things. I was raised in a more non-denominational Christian type environment, of kind of what I call cash and prizes Christians. So you do this to get this, transactional Christianity. And I did lots of this to get my cash and prizes, to get a good life, but it didn't stop me from having lots of blind, kind of getting beat up on the sides from life, things that I couldn't control. And so my experience was like, I don't want that God. If you can tithe and be a good person, and work and do mission work and help people and check all the boxes of all the good things that make someone a good person, and you still get your butt kicked by people dying who you feel like shouldn't have died, people who said they love you and then they want to leave the marriage now. Like, I didn't want to sign up for that God. So the idea of adopting that horrible God that screwed me over, that was my narrative back then. I didn't want that one. So step three would be a pretty hard thing for someone in that situation to sit down with. Scott talks about it from the addict's perspective, and just says, at the time of step three, if you're not ready to bring a God as you understand him or her into your life, you can just substitute it again with a higher power. And at that time, as I mentioned for step two, that higher power can just be something outside yourself. So it can be that 12-step fellowship, that betrayed partner support group, that therapist that you feel like you can trust, that sponsor, those friends who maybe aren't yes men. They'll actually be honest, but also are compassionate and empathetic and non-judgmental. Your outside higher power can be that for a while, because it's just basically the point of step three is another decision to realize that you're not the one in control, that you have to turn your will over. And there's a lot of misunderstandings, and this was hard for me, because I think the first 30 plus years of my life, I heard surrender, I heard losing, not enough, weak, I need to run on the treadmill, go faster, think harder, be a better puzzle solver. But I learned, after kind of I got beat down by a bunch of different life events, where it kind of crushed my soul, and I didn't want to think and puzzle solve anymore, that that's actually when you're most liberated and most empowered, is because I don't have to puzzle solve. I don't have to have all the answers. I just need to lean into a higher power, and lean into groups of trusted loved ones when I'm in that broken state. Because the only thing that I can actually control is I can, do my best to monitor my emotions, stay in line with my values and goals, and who I am and who I want to be as a person. And I can control, for the most part, myself, but everything outside of that is a joke. I mean, there's that saying, we plan, God laughs. It's a bit of a cynical saying, but it's just saying I was wasting so much of my time and energy. I was exhausting myself trying to create the formula for happiness, trying to create the formula for control. I mean, I really was, still am, and still struggle with the list making lifestyle. I want the bullet points. I want the formula for success. Tell me the 6 things that I need to do every day to be a good parent. So bad stuff doesn't happen to my children. Tell me the 4 things that I need to do with my husband and to my husband and with my husband, so he doesn't want to suddenly look at me and say, I don't want to be with that anymore. I just want the hard concrete stuff that I can sink my teeth into. Um, I have to constantly remind myself that that is the exhausting path. That is the path that's going to set me up to be bitter, resentful, and angry, and also manipulative, right? Because when we want to control everything, being manipulative is just a common byproduct of that. So I talk about in step 3 that it made me think, well, I don't know if you guys know, but if you're in 12-step meetings, they often open and close the meetings with the Serenity Prayer. So it's God grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I laugh because when I was in my journey, in my mid 30s, trying to be a better person, trying to relinquish control, surrender, do all these things that were really, really hard. Um, I always had the Serenity Prayer up on my corkboard growing up because I was like, golly, that sounds nice. Like, yeah, God grant me the serenity. But the truth was, is I didn't want that. I wanted to be in the driver's seat. It sounded really nice to have the idea that I could kind of like put a higher power, or a power outside myself or greater than me. I wanted to, they were like a little prescription bottle that I had in the medicine cabinet. And I wanted to pull them out when the going got tough. And I want to say, when my mom gets pancreatic cancer and is told she's going to die, I want to pray to that being and I want to surrender to that, whatever I need to take to keep her alive. But then I want to put that back in the medicine cabinet and I just want to do life to get my cash and prizes and do it in my formula where I know I'm going to do it right or the way I've decided, right? There's safety. There's safety. There's a warm blanket, like an insanity warm blanket of sticking with your default traits and talents and way of doing life, right? Of performing, getting A's, people pleasing, and or even just kind of some people will just isolate, not engage to begin with, so they never get hurt to begin with. Like we all want to go to our little control system. We don't want to use this higher power all day, every day, surrendering what is not in our control and kind of asking, okay, how do I make the next step forward? What's the best choice? I need help with this. I need to consult somebody or something to figure out how to move forward with that. I didn't want to consult with anybody because partly I think I didn't want anyone to tell me that I was losing my mind. So, so I found through my work, reluctantly, that the most miserable people I know, and I've been working in this world for a long time, but the most miserable people I know are the most controlling people. And that was me. So I needed to learn to figure out how to remain Kristin, because there's parts of me that make me me, and I shouldn't be ashamed of them. So it's not becoming like surrendering and relinquishing your your will to a higher power doesn't mean you lose your soul and everything you are. But and you need to maintain your values, your goals, your boundaries. You have an inner compass inside you, but you are regularly engaging entities outside yourself, again, whether it's a therapist, friends, sponsors, praying to a higher power, etc., because you are a flawed human being and you are, let's say, a victim to the vulnerabilities of life, just like everybody else. And you got to have a backup plan besides your best thinking. So, and for addicts too, we know your best thinking gets you to the same place of your addiction and all the misery and all the consequences that come with it. So that's why in addiction, you need the higher power and the system, the accountability system outside of you, because those default settings are wired pretty hardcore in you. So I think that's about it. It's just, we talk about in this section some exercises that you can kind of do. In the 12-step community, when they do step 3, they'll often kind of almost have the person write a want ad of what they want their higher power to be. Because again, when we're talking about this power greater than ourselves, God as we understand him or her or God, it cannot be a judging, shaming God, right? We got where we were from feeling so much shame and so much judgment and feeling the raw vulnerability of life. So I think this is my opinion, but I think a God that is loving and accepting and knows your flaws because you share them openly with that God. And there's love in spite of it. I think I've said this many times, but from my years and years of working in treatment, one of the most aha moments I've had is I work from people who have mental health issues like depression, anxiety, crisis, severe trauma, over to people who have all different types of addictions. So eating, sex, porn, drug addiction, alcohol. So I run the gamut of people who come to treatment for help. And despite all those different backgrounds, I feel like I find just one common entity, which is people who sit in my groups broken and sad and hurt on so many different levels for so many different reasons, but they just want to be loved in spite of their flaws. They want to be loved despite the damage they've caused, loved in spite the trauma and the exposure to vulnerability that they've felt like has been the center of their abuse and hurt and pain. And so I always wonder, if we have that wiring in us to want to be loved so desperately, despite our flaws, despite our mistakes, despite our trauma, I have to think that there's an entity out there that is capable of giving us love and acceptance despite our flaws. I mean, because humans are pretty flawed. We struggle with loving unconditionally because we're humans and we're control freaks. But so speaking of that, I'll just say a quote from the book is that every moment we try to predict and control life by manipulating our circumstances or denying our truth, we are exhausting ourselves, continuing our suffering, and avoiding the true work of life, which is to surrender to what we cannot control and choose to show up and be seen by others, not really knowing the outcome. A lot of you that chime in are here because you've been hurt deeply by someone that you love. So the way that step 3 can be helpful to you is you really have life that has been outside of your control. Your family has been thrown into this upside down world that you did not sign up for. You've been a victim to your partner's addiction and lying and hurt. Some of you have contracted diseases that because of your partner's addiction. You have lost financial security because of your partner's addiction. There's so much evidence out there that humans, or specifically your partner, cannot be trusted. So I implore you to find others that you can lean into. I know this is counterintuitive, but the more research I do about betrayal trauma, relational trauma, the trauma that you've experienced by being lied to, manipulated, hurt at the hands of a trusted loved one. The most effective way to heal these shame wounds, these trauma wounds, is through connection with other people. And it's so counterintuitive because, of course, once we've been hurt by one human that we trusted and loved and exposed ourselves to, and they still lied and they still hurt us, we don't ever, 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 ever want to do that again. But so much of the research says that that is the only way through it. That is the only way to repair these wounds. That's why I I keep fighting to make more of these betrayed partner workshops, because I could be the best therapist in the world, but I can only heal a fractional piece of the wound of what's been created by being a betrayed partner. So much of the healing happens in these groups with these clients who all come together with shared struggles, shared suffering, shared pain, and they can openly share with another person, and they can have it received with empathy and love and compassion, not judgment. And you need to do better, and you should have had sex with him or her more often. And these are the ways that you screwed up in your relationship, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So step 3 is just an entity, a facet of that, which is that we need to learn to build a trusting relationship with a higher power, however you define that, to learn how to lean into that to heal those relational wounds. And that's it.
Good stuff. So I want to affirm that you are a great therapist, but I tell people all the time, going to a great therapist who knows what they're doing for 50 minutes once a week to heal what you're talking about, these major wounds, it isn't enough. So, and addicts love them, but they're pretty much check the box. I'm seeing my therapist, so that's enough. And so really, Dr. Rob talks all the time about the opposite of addiction is healthy attachment. So where do we find those healthy attachments? And I have a lot of people that, don't believe in a higher power or whatever. And for addicts, I tell them, yes, you do. Your addiction, whatever form it's taking, is your higher power. You will do whatever it demands at whatever time, despite the consequences. So you have a higher power. It's not a traditional version of God as as others might understand it. But I love your cash and prizes. And I thought about, though, because when you don't get the cash and prizes, then the shame that, oh, I must not have done that right. So then pushing the perfectionism of, oh, I have to do it better so I get the cash and prizes, or the disappointment if I didn't get the cash and prizes. So what's wrong with this system? But that's a really harsh that's a harsh reality to live in, that if you do good enough, if you do it right, then then good things will happen to you, and no bad should happen to you, and that's just not life. So I was thinking about the paradox. I mean, so much in addiction recovery is paradox of we're isolated in our addiction, we don't want to change, and so how do we change that? We go talk to other people who are in a similar situation as us. I mean, that's ridiculous, but but that's what really works. And you were talking about the plethora of conditions, how the acting out shows up for people, and the underlying issue is the same. And I was in a meeting with the former head of ASAM, which is the American Society of Addiction Medicine, and I can never get his name right, but and I should really practice it because I affirm him often. But he said, there is no S in addiction. Addiction is addiction. And I was like, so true. Whatever form of acting out it is, whether it's chemicals, gambling, shopping, whatever it is, it's at the root, it's still the same underlying issue. So, which is why so many addicts struggle with, you start going through the list of, okay, I got to stop, the cocaine and porn. Okay, what else? Eating, gaming, shopping, yes, 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 and so if we address these underlying wounds, if we're in healthy attachment and connection with other people, we stand a chance of not just stopping those behaviors, but changing in a meaningful way. I was listening to, I started my day with meditations, and I was listening to this one, and it said, there's pain with change, and there's pain of staying the same. And this person that was sharing said, choose to grow. And I was like, oh, and I typed myself a text of that, because I was like, that is so true, because people always perceive that there's just pain of changing. And I was like, no, there is real pain of not changing. And so if we identify that that is absolutely the case, then I think we're more likely to reach out, and take that next step, and, turn our will over to the higher power, et cetera. So, and so Mark Anthony Lord did a series last year, and he on this platform, so you can find that, but his was about spirituality, and he, take whatever concept of your higher power, throw it out, and find what works for you. And I think that's what Kristin was really sharing too, is find something that is going to work for you that you can lean into. It can continue to grow and become different. So we've got some questions, so we're going to get started with that. So, and the first one is, this is from a partner. How can a partner heal our marriage, or our marriage heal, if the addict doesn't have a counselor skilled in the partner's model? I shouldn't have to be the one trying to help him understand my trauma, actions, behavior, i.e. pulling away from for safety due to his lack of recovery work, results of me swallowing my pain, or his defensiveness and blame shifting. Thank you for your help, Kristin.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what kind of work is happening or why you feel like that person is not skilled in the partner's model. So if you could shed light about why you're feeling like the counseling is not keeping your betrayal in mind, that might be helpful to me. But you're right. This is hard. Even if the person is just skilled in addiction recovery and pushing 12-step concepts, or having this person meet with other addicts in recovery, it's a slow process, but there's a humbling experience that happens. I was talking to somebody, and I feel like I said this last time, but I was talking to somebody who was a betrayed partner. And I said, what's your opinion about doing couples work before disclosure? And she said, my only issue with that is that if I'd done my couples work before disclosure, so before he had time to really kind of almost have his face shoved in, like how bad it was, how much he dismissed his promises, his commitments, how much he snuck around, how much he gaslighted me in the process, until he really truly grasped that if he'd done a disclosure, it would have been, and we'd had couples therapy, it would have been pretty empty. I would have continued to kind of look at a guy across the couch from me who is minimizing his behavior, justifying his behavior. Because remember, that's also, we're talking about, at that time, it's his precious, like it's his favorite coping skill, his best friend, his higher power. And he was going to say anything and do anything to justify it, because he was still on a path of justifying why it wasn't that bad, and why it was his behaviors that didn't hurt you, right. So I guess what I'm just trying to say is, as time goes by, if that's the type of therapy and work and recovery that he or she is doing, you shouldn't have to be in charge of helping that person understand the consequences of his or her action. So I don't know, maybe you can say more about why you feel, if it's fresh and new, that's a common state to be in. If we're talking it's been a year down the line and the person's been going to meetings and in therapy, and you're still having to explain why this is traumatizing to you, why gaslighting messes with your head, why et cetera, that's concerning.
Yeah, and I think I have the same question of of timing, because this sounds very early in the
Hmm.
process. And so, a couple of things. I said earlier, if someone is only going to a counselor once a week and checking off the box of, look, I'm doing my recovery work, not enough. I say consistently to addicts, if you engage with your recovery with the same energy that you did your addiction, like Kristin was saying, it's my precious, you will do really well. If you're just checking off a box like, well, I see my counselor and I'm going to go listen in on a meeting, then lack of progress, even in a year out, or worse, is unfortunately the side effect. I would invite you to read Out of the Doghouse, and Dr. Rob always says throw it at him and have him read it. It's a soft cover book, but I'm not sure, perhaps just say, I would really like you to read this. There are also podcasts on that topic, but it is about how to rebuild trust, how to slowly, gain some empathy. But, you're asking somebody that has no skills for empathy, that has been, honed in on, my behavior, to look outside themselves. And it's terrifying initially. And we don't have skills to do that, but we can learn. So, but it does take time. But that's why a lot of the guys, in a short time in our treatment program, it's like doing 2 years of therapy. etc., because we have them for 14 days and we're really honing in on what those underlying issues are and giving them empathy. Start having empathy for other guys in the group, who are, hearing what happened with their partner. If they can have empathy for them, well, then they can start translating that to other people, including their loved ones. So it's a very
Mhm.
vulnerable and challenging situation. You are not alone. How do I break my trauma bond with my porn addicted husband so I can implement a consequence to breaking of my boundaries?
Hmm. Well, I mean, first of all, I feel the way that you explained it is a little shaming and blaming. So just be careful with that. Be careful that your self-talk isn't like, if I wasn't such a messed up person, I wouldn't tolerate the way he behaves with me or the way he engages with me. As Rob would say, there's nothing wrong with the fact that you've loved this man, that you many, many times have given him the benefit of the doubt, and tried to love him in spite of his flaws. But you're right, boundaries are boundaries. And I think a really great way to help implement consequences or, stop from breaking boundaries is to bring in outside help. Bring in betrayed partner. Like I remember for me personally, when I was just talking, when I was going to therapist every day saying, these are the things that have to be worked out in couples therapy. This has to be done in couples therapy. But on the inside, I was really scared of setting these boundaries, saying these things, making these really, if I ask for this, then where do I go after that if he says no or if it doesn't work? But if week after week of saying it in therapy and saying it in therapy, I was like, oh my God, I can't stomach coming into this session one more time and saying the same damn thing over and over again and having zero follow through. So that's helpful, doing betrayed partners groups where you're kind of holding yourself accountable. And there is a progress made when you find yourself kind of saying, oh, I made a non-negotiable boundary. He broke it once again. There's zero consequences. You're moving forward when you're speaking that out loud to other people. So I would encourage that.
And I am ditto with Kristen with it feels shaming to me that you have failed because of that. Like I tell partners all the time, when you got together with let's say it's a husband, when you got together with your husband, was there like a roadmap that was to say, and at year of this, you're going to be dealing with porn addiction and betrayal and infidelity, whatever? No. So this is all uncharted territory for all of you, but setting safe boundaries for you that are, yeah, that are clear and that you can hold to, even if there are little boundaries for you to start with, and that would be a victory because you're setting something, and I bet you'd feel good about that. But do get support. I love what Kristen was saying, is get professional help to help guide that. Okay, I'm the betrayed partner. What if my spouse doesn't see the need to explore his childhood traumas that paved the way and fed his need for his addictive behaviors? I want to know how, I mean, like, we talk all the time, like we do trauma informed therapy and things like that, but you don't just rip off the band-aid and go, let's talk about your early childhood wounds, because that's such a huge trigger. So where is this person in the recovery process? Otherwise, the first thing is stop the behaviors and then get a plan for addressing those things with professional help. But otherwise, that, I just am going relapse, 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 if they don't have the support to be able to navigate that. So
Right.
I think there's a lot of people that do some level of addiction recovery and never really address that stuff. I always wonder how happy, joyous, and free they are, or if they switch. I mean, I'm on all these, I shouldn't be, but and I try to be moderate about it, but I'm on these Facebook addiction recovery things, and people are going, yeah, I found that cannabis is, it's really helping me not use heroin, for example. And I'm like, you're still using a chemical. So I can only do this a little bit, but to me, that is not happy, joyous, and free. And I remember that my recovery means full recovery. Like I can't just go, well, that's less than this, so it's okay. That's my addict brain justifying, minimizing. That was where I went with that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's same thing that childhood trauma, similar if you're a betrayed partner, right? The former person talking about trauma bond. No one benefits from diving into their childhood during the initial crisis. There's almost like a settling, there's a triaging that has to happen. If you're bleeding out of your gut, you're going to need to repair that first, and then we can get to the additional trauma wounds, etc. I'm personally a huge fan of attachment science and interpersonal neurobiology, which is respecting and understanding and researching how your brain becomes wired from the first several years of your life, and how your childhood relationships do impact and inform your adulthood. But all of this needs to become triaged, again, to reference the 12 steps. That stuff doesn't really, in step 4, we start going into the inventory of your good, bad, light, dark. So that is kind of dipping your toe in the childhood trauma stuff. 5, 6, and 7 are about kind of those traits and talents and character defects and all those go-to behaviors that you've kept because they've been your formula, although they're also dragging you down and destroying you and sucking your soul dry. So I mean, these are all little baby steps of getting to that, of understanding how childhood traumas can impact your addictive behaviors. You might first, you have to start with the basics things of, the circle plans are about what is relapse. Your middle circle is about what are the slippery slopes around that. First, you look at those and work on those triggers, and then you can get underneath that as often childhood traumas about why these things are triggering to you, why they've created a pattern of acting out. So that tends to be the process.
Well, and partners have really struggled with that because, they come into to a therapist, and the first thing, help, my husband, spouse, partner is, XYZ. And the first thing they're doing is like, well, let's talk about your childhood, and they're like, no, that like you're saying, you're bleeding out and there isn't help and support. So really time and place, handle the crisis that's in front of you first, and then have a plan long term. So next question, I struggle with how to react to my betrayed spouse because of the use of porn in our marriage and lies I have told my wife, who's asked for a divorce. I do not want a divorce. I know that she hasn't healed fully as she continues to work with her her betrayal therapist, I'm sure. I know right now she doesn't love me, hates me, and doesn't want to be married to me. That's interesting, because if she hates you, indifference is really, so we'll talk about that in a second. This is where she is right now and being unhealed. Should I take her current word at face value or take it as words from an unhealed person? And should I still work to reconcile my marriage? For instance, last night we shared some affection, and I viewed these moments as hope.
That's perfect step 3 example, right? You cannot control this woman. The damage and the hurt that has been done in the marriage may have made reconciliation not possible. Who knows? Obviously, I wouldn't do this for a living if I didn't have a crazy optimistic spirit about being able to heal and repair even the most destroyed relationships. But I don't know. In my head, it pops in my head. It's the 11th tradition of the 12 steps is that attraction, not promotion. So what I thought for you is the idea is that if I'm in recovery, I shouldn't have to walk around and be like, "Hi, I'm 20 years sober. Hi, I'm in recovery. Hi, I've been doing all this really personal growth. Have you noticed?" And the idea is that I don't need to promote myself as being this great changed person. It's about attraction. It should come across because I've done this deep, difficult work for myself, no matter what's going to happen with her. I've worked to listen better, to listen to understand and not to respond. I've done the work to identify what didn't work for me before and what I never want to do again, and the structures and the accountability system I'm going to live in to make sure that doesn't happen. I'm going to listen non-defensively. I'm going to make amends and apologize for things that I have done that were not okay. I'm going to hold space for her to be angry at me, and I'm going to sit there and understand it and be compassionate. I could imagine if someone done that to me, I would be so upset too. Those are that's attraction. I don't need to share that I'm in recovery and that I'm making all this amazing progress because it is seen and heard and experienced by my behaviors.
So what I read, and you won't like this, is I want, I want, I want, I want, and a lot of focus on her, and she needs to get healed. I don't hear, and I know that this is just a little bit that you're putting on here, but I don't hear, here's what I'm doing for my recovery. So what Kristin was talking about is exactly what I think too, is like, if you are doing your work, you will become trustworthy. You can't, your lips moving, that does not do anything. Your actions and showing her that how you are working hard on becoming a trustworthy person in all areas. If you haven't read Out of the Doghouse, if you have read it, reread it. If you haven't read Sex Addiction 101 and done the workbook, please, those are great starting points. The scary thing for me in this is you're completely focused on her unhealing, and I don't hear you focusing on your recovery. So I would invite you strongly to be working on your recovery, and then the attraction that Kristin was talking about. She's going to start going, oh, look, he actually was honest with me. Oh, he actually showed up. He said he was going to be home at 5 o'clock, and he was. Like, oh, I'm noticing that. That's but manipulate. Otherwise, it feels like manipulation that Kristin was talking about earlier. Manipulating to get what I want rather than what's really best. If you really love this woman, you want what's best for her, even if it's not with you. Even if it's not with you, that's mature love. I hope the two of you work it out. I'm like Kristin, an eternal optimist. I see lots of people heal from addiction and move forward in an honest relationship. So it is possible. I see this frequently, but if the focus is always on her, she needs to hurry up and get healed so that we can be together. That would not be, in my opinion, a positive trajectory. So, okay. They say relationships are most important thing for a successful life. For someone who's not really good at interpersonal relationships, that's welcome to addiction, is a dismissive, avoidant, and fearful avoidant type. What are some of the first steps I can do to start developing deeper and richer relationships with others? Great question. Thank you for
All
asking
right,
it. Yeah,
let's get into this. All
go
right.
for it.
First step, you might need to just get a pet, and that's okay. And so form a relationship with a pet, because sometimes when you have the dismissive avoidant, when you have the fearful avoidant, usually from trauma, humans are scary. And then another way is to kind of be around other like-minded people who struggled in similar ways, which is often in 12-step meetings. A lot of the people who are sex addicts or in recovery for addiction issues will have the disorganized, fearful avoidant type or the dismissive avoidant type histories, but they've been able to form relationships through the sponsor-sponsee relationship, the book study fellowships that they have, those breakouts. Sometimes, obviously therapists, a human friendship might be a little scary for you too, but kind of a more transactional, paid relationship might feel safer to you. So
With a
form a connection
therapist.
with a therapist. Yes. Yeah. Thank you for clarifying. Avoid the other type of transactional relationships. But things like that. So those are the starting points. I'm a big believer that these these different attachment styles are a product of trauma, childhood trauma. So that's an example of when childhood trauma exploration, and not even necessarily childhood, it could be teens, adolescent, young adults, first relationships, doing some EMDR, eye movement, desensitization and reprocessing work or attachment trauma work around those kind of things to lower your regulation. So when you go to these 12-step groups, men's groups, women's groups, connection groups, and you have that really high anxiety around it, that you have the skill set to lower your regulation. If you are those attachment styles, by default, you will have very upregulated, anxiety provoking, uncomfortable experiences trying to connect with other people. So you have to do the work to learn how to downregulate, deep breathing, talk it out, walk into a meeting and be like, this is very uncomfortable for me. I don't really like this. I don't want your phone number. I'm going to struggle with calling you back. say it out. Be that like that internal monologue, you need to turn it outward and just start speaking it to other people and use some regulation skills. I have a video on how our nervous system experiences crisis, and I talk about all these down regulation skills that you can use to kind of endure the vulnerability and the scariness of connecting with humans.
And it is scary, and you're going to be stepping in a different space. I have to wonder if you have a sponsor. If you don't, starting with that, and I literally use this in my early recovery, because I would be so fearful, and I would say, what's the worst that can happen? And they could say no, and you know what, I'm going to survive that. Like, I had to do I will not die in the moment, just because somebody said no. And like, that was like, oh, okay, I can be unhappy, I can feel sad, I can feel rejected, whatever, but I'm not going to die. Okay. So like that kind of crazy, such an abrupt way of looking at it really helped me. So I would invite you to a pet, not a fish. Like, it needs to be like a real pet,
Yeah,
something that
that
so
you can physically touch.
yes, and just start, and celebrate every little victory. Just like, I talked to that person after a 12-step meeting. I asked to connect with them. Great, those are great, and just notice those. I would invite you also not to feel shame if you didn't get brave enough at one meeting. That's okay too. But just celebrate the small moments that you go, that's a victory for me. So okay, follow up on unskilled coach. He doesn't hold his feet to the fire when my husband, oh, unskilled coach. So it's a coach, is not a therapist. So that's completely different. Doesn't follow through on recovery work suggested by a therapist or the podcast he listens to or what I've asked him to do. No formal disclosure yet, no sponsor, no accountability partner, no reading or listening to recovery material. I guess I'd ask you, what are your boundaries? And have you had a conversation saying, this is what I need to see? Or therapeutic separation might be, I mean, I don't know what you know, what addicts hear is the Charlie Brown wah 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 wah, because they're used to that. So what, with working with a therapist, maybe you ask for a session with his therapist and say, here's the struggle. I don't know what he's telling you. And if you're only hearing from your husband what the therapist says, don't buy that. So say, I really would like to have a session so that, I can clear the air. I can understand what has been presented and what he's supposed to be doing, and here are my concerns. So, but I'm wondering what boundary there is that he needs to bump up against, because, we're not motivated for change, so what are
Get
your
in that
thoughts,
betrayed
Kristin?
partners group.
Yes, yes,
Get in
yes.
that people around you who also struggle with the boundaries, and that's okay. We all do. Being around other people, you can garner strength and courage from other people. And you gotta, when you're afraid to set that boundary, maybe someone next to you will be able to help you
So,
reinforce that.
so on www.kristinsnowden.com, you can connect. She's got some workshops. Well, actually, I'll let you tell what you've got.
Well, everything right now I'm working on, I currently have workshops where I am the moderator. I'm working on getting some more people in with me so I can have more available. I'm getting a community. I'm working on building a community so betrayed partners can just even sign in and get connection from other betrayed partners and pose questions and challenge each other. I also have a couple different educational courses like the book and stuff like that to help you get the educational background and understandings to help you take it into your therapist or your couples therapist or other things like that. I'm working on getting more there. I want to create a community where people who are struggling in a similar way can find support. But you can also get that in 12-step meetings. So,
And on
right.
sexandrelationshiphealing.com, we've got a betrayed partner group later today at 12:30 Pacific time, and there's one tomorrow morning, and we're adding more. So keep connecting. So for a partner non-addicts, do either of you have a recommended method format for working the steps? Can you hold up your book, please?
Yeah. I mean, look, there's if you love an addict, there's also Al-Anon, which is a really great program. Rob is actually putting together all the paperwork and stuff for Pro Dependence Anonymous as well. I've seen the kind of starter packet for it.
On
But this is,
prodependence.org is a 12-step for loved ones across the addictions. So that's a whole new community that's starting. There will be meetings. I'm staying current
right.
on what's going on. So that, yes, there are, and there's a different 12-step for prodependence, which I love. They really honed in on what a loved one might be experiencing. So
Yeah, and the idea is that it's a little different than if you have a hardcore drug addiction or sex addiction idea. The metaphor I give is if they're diabetic and they don't eat right and live a very specific lifestyle, they will lose their limbs, they will die prematurely. Non-addicts are not the type 1 diabetic. They're more of kind of a person who just like they have digestion issues, they have stress issues and seasonal problems that they need to kind of regularly check in with, work to be better at, do some personal growth, weather difficult crises. And that's kind of what this book is about, is using it for something like that.
So the next question, my husband has limerence emotional affair with a coworker. He still works with her and so do I. He has so much shame that he cannot feel any empathy for me. His IC is going to work on shame. She's not an addict counselor. We also considered from EMDR for his childhood emotional neglect. He doesn't want to accept that he may have had an addiction. So you think people who have limerence are love addicts? He actually did say, I feel addicted to her attention, her flirting. I also wonder if anyone has been able to heal successfully while they're still working with their affair partner. That's a lot. So let's
Yeah,
unpack
it's
it
a
a
lot.
little piece at a time.
I kind of specialize in that. So not just sex addiction, but kind of single infidelities. On my website, I have a lot of really great material about just kind of why infidelity happens, what tends to be the multi pieces involved. One of them is even, I wrote it from just working with so many people who were having affairs and kind of the things that they would say during their affair to kind of justify it, or the way they explained it. And I kind of talk about that. So look through my blog history and there's some really great stuff there. But in a word, this is from my experience, so just mine. You could hear a different thing from another therapist. But if there is, and if I'm married to someone or in a monogamous relationship with someone, and I'm trying to assess the viability of that relationship, heal damage that's been done within this relationship, repair, etc., that cannot occur if there is outside issues going on, such as one of the people having an addiction, one of the people having an affair partner, an active affair partner. You can never assess the viability of a relationship, work to heal it, when there are outside things drawing that person's attention, screwing with their coping skills, stopping them from maybe really facing the reality and the consequences of what's going on here. So I would say no, but that's just a quick answer.
Yeah, no, I mean, we know lots of people who've gotten a different job. They've needed to, if they want the relationship to heal, they've needed to get a different job. And I also got caught with he has so much shame, he can't feel empathy for me. And I thought, yeah, and he gets to, and this is me, he gets to wallow in his shame rather, oh, I feel bad, rather than you feel bad, I mean, you are hurt. And that's the problem with shame. And Kristin has done webinars on shame and how unhelpful it is. It's a useless emotion, but it also, he gets to be, oh, poor me, I feel so bad that I did this. And so I hope he works with a professional who is trained in these issues. Otherwise, it's like going to the GP for cancer treatment. It doesn't really get what you need done. So, okay, next question. Is it okay to be friends with men in early recovery who are straight if I'm a gay woman in recovery? I love this question.
Friends with men in recovery, early who are straight. I mean, our usual saying is they can't be in your attraction template,
Yes.
right? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
so if you're a woman, having a gay best friend is okay because there's not the worry about it crossing boundaries and vice versa.
Yes,
For sake of time, we have a lot of questions, so I
okay.
think we need to
Yes.
kind of go.
Yes. Yeah. No, I love that. So how does EMDR compare to trauma-informed therapy? How many years does it take to repair trauma in regular trauma-informed therapy versus EMDR? Those are completely different things. Can you talk
Yeah,
about
one
it?
of the greatest books to really educate yourself on that would be Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk. He gets into the nuts and bolts of what happens to your brain when you've been traumatized and the various science evidence-based ways of rewiring that organization. Because when your brain is traumatized, it wires a very specific way to react a certain way, to be hypervigilant, to have these undesired responses despite no longer being exposed to the threat. Things like EMDR and other things that he lists help rewire that brain so it can get back to like a normal setting. That's the quick answer.
Mhm.
Trauma-informed therapy, that's me. This is my opinion. Trauma-informed therapy is what I just gave you, is just me telling you what trauma is and how it shows up and how you might be affected by the trauma you're experiencing. It does not rewire your brain.
Any advice on how to help the partner focus on herself and focus on building connection with friends and family without self-shaming? I'm trying to heal from the relationship, how all the lies and gaslighting and manipulation have affected my nervous system and PTSD, etc. I'm having a hard time moving past all the shame. I
You're
hate
going
when
to have,
partners take on the shame too. So
mm,
but please,
yeah.
yeah.
Friends and family are going to struggle
Mm-mm.
understand what you're going through, which is you got to get to a group of people who are betrayed partners, and they will really help you release the shame. You can tell your friends and family. The tough thing I run into with that specific thing is they get hesitant to really be honest and authentic about what they're struggling with, all the lies that you were told, all the gaslighting, all the really messed up stuff that he or she did to you in the state of his or her addiction or cheating, etc. And so you don't want them to forever have this story of who this person is, and just in case the marriage stays or you reconcile or whatever. So having an outside support group through all those entities on sexandrelationshiphealing.com, they have the resources and support link, they have my link, they have all your groups, they have all my groups, etc. That's what I would encourage you to
Well,
do.
and the book you just mentioned, The Body Keeps Score, doing trauma work. You've got PTSD. Do some very good trauma work just to help your nervous system. Okay, next question. Separated from SA husband 1.5 years for continued lying. He has been in therapy, group therapy, SAA meetings 1.5 years. Still no trust and safety due to lying, manipulation, slips, blight response to my trauma, etc. He is saying his counselor recommends limit discussions to 45 minutes. He can't handle 45 minutes without flight setting in, and then do something together like massage, date night, mini vacation, etc. It seems like my husband and his therapist are living in fantasy together. How can I possibly do those things when after all the time he is still not doing the work to rebuild the trust and safety I so desperately need? Seems like they are wanting to skip important steps that rebuild trust.
I don't know what kind of treatment it's looking like, but the standard way of doing things is a person who is trained in sex addiction recovery, working with him, sex addiction therapy and betrayed partners work, working with you, and then couples work going on where you guys and everyone is coordinating and talking to each other and touching base, because as we know with addiction, there's a lot of lying, there's a lot of manipulation, there's a lot of misinformation, and these types of addicts can be very charismatic and kind of perform when the camera's on and then it shuts off. So there has to be lots of talking in the background about what's going on while maintaining boundaries and helping the person still feel safe to be honest and open. But then again, that's also why a sponsor is supposed to exist, because that's a complete separate entity that's not involved in the therapeutic process. That's the kind of sacred relationship that gets to stay separate from everything. But that's my opinion.
So two quick things, then we've got one more question. So what I see is he is saying his counselor recommends. That's a huge red flag for me. So have the conversation. Ideally, your therapeutic support person, your counselor and his counselor, with the two of you, so that all of you are hearing the exact same thing, and you can
Right.
share. We can't go 45 minutes. He's saying, you're saying 45 minutes. He can't go 45 minutes without flight. So he Dr. Rob talks about this all the time. If what has been done isn't enough, then a higher level of care. So we have a treatment center that does exactly that. So,
Well said.
okay. Last question. My partner has been with AA for the last 3 years, and since COVID, he stopped attending AA meetings. Sex porn addiction discovery happened 5 months ago. My partner has 1 foot in treatment from sex porn addiction, read the book Sex Addiction 101, and has individual session every 2 weeks with our CSAT and couple session once a month for Zoom. So more stuff. He says he is interested in listening to podcasts and recovery. However, he doesn't put even a quarter of the energy towards healing that he puts other activities in his busy schedule: gym, shopping, work, finances, etc. Told him at least 10 times I don't feel safe and I don't see him doing what is proven to heal addicts. What would an addict in denial need to listen to or realize how important it is to engage in proven formulas to heal fully? 12 steps, and more. Talk to others about his addiction. So
I think Tammy just answered the question a moment ago. If this current level of care is not working, there might need to be a higher level of care. And you might need to be going into your support environment as well. Because if you can't trust your loved one to kind of change and be there for you and be present for you and help you work through your betrayal trauma, then you need to be leaning into a group who can hear you and be present for you and kind of teach you what real safe intimacy and connection is supposed to look like.
And you said it, I've said it 10 times, and I have the Charlie Brown, he's hearing wah 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 wah. So, or he or she. So I would invite you, this will be posted, this video will be posted on sexandrelationshiphealing.com either later today or tomorrow. Feel free to watch it with your partner. Just say, I want to watch this. I think that might be a really good start. So, but anybody, email me, Tammy, TAMI at seekingintegrity.com. Reach out to Kristin if you've got other questions. Kristin, delightful as always to see you. I will see you in April for step 4. Thank you all for the great questions and just being here. And please know we care, we believe in healing, and there is lots of other connection and hope. So bye,
everyone.
everybody.
Thank you.